I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My 5-year-old son, Liam, had just delivered a message that didn't just break my heart, it threatened to end our lives. He told me his father was planning to burn our house down, with us inside. The airport parking garage was freezing, even for September, and the concrete seemed to spin around me. All I could hear was the frantic beat of my own heart as I stared at Liam's small, pale face in the rearview mirror, a seriousness there no child his age should ever have to wear. "What do you mean, baby?" My voice sounded impossibly calm, a stark contrast to the earthquake happening inside me. "What did you hear?" Liam picked nervously at his jacket, refusing to meet my eyes. He was usually such a chatterbox. "I got up early," he mumbled. "I wanted to give Daddy my drawing before he left." His office door was open a little, and he was talking on the phone. My stomach plunged, a cold, sickening freefall. "What did he say?" I pressed, almost breathless. Liam looked up, his small face etched with something I never wanted to see there again, fear. He said, "Your name." And then something about insurance, and how much money it would be. And then... His voice cracked. He said the house would burn down tonight while he was gone. He said it would look like an accident because of the old wiring. The parking garage started tilting. I pressed my palm against the cold window, desperate for something solid to ground me. Ethan and I had been married for 8 years. We lived in a modest colonial in the suburbs of Chicago. He worked in commercial real estate development. I taught 3rd grade at the elementary school where Liam was in kindergarten. This couldn't be real. But Liam's brown eyes, so much like my own, told me everything. He wasn't making this up. My son didn't have the capacity to fabricate something so specific, so terrifying. "Did he see you?" I managed to ask. Liam shook his head. I ran back to my room really quiet. I heard him come upstairs later and knock on my door, but I pretended to be asleep. Then, after you both left with him to the airport, I told you in the car. My mind raced back through the morning. Ethan had been unusually affectionate at breakfast, pulling me close, kissing my forehead. He'd hugged Liam for a long time before getting in the car. At the terminal, he'd looked back twice as he walked toward security. I'd thought he was being sentimental about his week-long trip to Denver. Instead, he'd been saying goodbye to a son he expected to lose. "Okay." My hands shaking, I pulled out my phone. "Okay, baby. You did the right thing telling me." Who could I call? The police? And tell them what? That my 5-year-old overheard a conversation suggesting my husband planned arson and insurance fraud? They'd think I was paranoid, or going through a messy separation. Ethan was charming, respected in our community. I had no proof beyond a child's testimony. But I couldn't go home. I started the car and pulled out of the parking garage, heading away from the airport. My sister, Chloe, lived 40 minutes north, but she and Ethan had always been close. Too close. She'd side with him, convinced I was overreacting. My best friend from college, Harper, had moved to Arizona 3 years ago. My parents were on a cruise somewhere in the Caribbean, unreachable for another week. I drove aimlessly through the suburbs, past strip malls and gas stations, trying to think. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan landed safely. "Love you both. Don't wait up tonight. I have dinner meetings all evening." The casual cruelty of it made me want to vomit. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and sat there, engine running. Liam asked if he could have a snack, and I realized we'd left the house with nothing. No clothes, no toiletries, just my purse and phone, and potentially our lives. "Stay in the car, honey. Lock the doors. I'll be right back." Inside, I grabbed a basket and moved through the aisles mechanically, granola bars, juice boxes, a package of underwear for Liam, toothbrushes. My hands operated independently from my frozen brain. At the checkout, the teenage cashier made small talk about the weather. I nodded numbly, swiped my credit card, and carried the bags back to the car. Liam was fine, playing a game on the tablet we kept in the backseat for long drives. The normalcy of it broke something inside me. I sat in the driver's seat and let myself cry for 30 seconds, then wiped my face and started searching my phone for hotels. We couldn't use our credit cards. Ethan could track those. I had $73 in cash. The Holiday Inn Express off the highway wanted $90 per night. I sat there, paralyzed, until my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother-in-law, Eleanor. My finger hovered over the decline button. Then I answered. "Sweetheart." Her warm voice filled the car. "Ethan told me he'd be in Denver all week. I thought I'd come stay with you and Liam, keep you company. Are you home?" Something in her tone felt off. Too eager. Too insistent. "Actually, Eleanor, we're out running errands. Going to make a day of it." "Oh, well, I'm already on my way. I'll just let myself in with a spare key and wait for you." The spare key we kept under the third flower pot on the front porch. The one Ethan had insisted we keep there despite my protests about security. "You know what? I think we're going to visit my Aunt Susan upstate. Last-minute decision. We'll probably stay the night." Silence stretched across the line. Then Eleanor's voice turned cold. "I see. Well, have a nice time." She hung up before I could respond. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Eleanor knew. Maybe she didn't know the specific plan, but she knew something was supposed to happen today. She wanted to be there, probably to establish an alibi or play the grieving grandmother. I thought about the life insurance policy Ethan had insisted we increase last year, $2 million. He'd convinced me it was necessary now that we had Liam, that we needed to protect our family's future. I'd signed the papers without much thought, trusting my husband. What an idiot I'd been. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Grayson, this is Marcus Bell from your husband's office. There's been some confusion with the Denver trip. Can you give me a call?" I didn't recognize the name. Ethan's office manager was named Susan. I turned off my phone completely, disabled location services, and threw it into my purse. "Mom?" Liam's voice was small. "Are we going to be okay?" I turned in my seat to look at him. His brown eyes, so much like my own, stared back at me with a trust one didn't deserve. I'd failed to protect him by missing the signs, by being too comfortable in my marriage to see what was festering underneath. "Yes, baby. We're going to be fine, but we need to be very careful and very smart. Can you do that with me?" He nodded solemnly. I drove to a Target across town and bought a prepaid cell phone with cash using money I withdrew from an ATM. Then I sat in the parking lot and made the call I should have made hours ago. Chicago Police Department. "How can I direct your call?" "I need to report a planned arson." The operator transferred me to Detective Reynolds. I explained everything as calmly as I could, knowing how insane it sounded: Liam's overheard conversation, Eleanor's suspicious call, the increased life insurance, my husband's convenient alibi in Denver. Detective Reynolds listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked for our address. "Ma'am, I need you to stay away from that house." "Can you do that?" "Yes. We're not going back." "Good. I'm going to send a unit to watch the property. If anyone shows up or anything happens, we'll have evidence. In the meantime, I need you to come down to the station so we can take a formal statement." "Can you do that today?" "Will my son have to testify?" "He's only 5. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, I need to hear exactly what he told you. And Mrs. Grayson, you did the right thing, taking this seriously." The police station was downtown, a 30-minute drive through traffic. Liam fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the stress. I parked in the visitor lot and gently woke him. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh, and the air smelled like burnt coffee. Detective Reynolds met us in the lobby. She was in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Come with me." She led us to an interview room with a table and chairs, offered Liam some cookies from a vending machine, and sat down across from me with a notepad. For the next 2 hours, I recounted everything: our marriage history, Ethan's business struggles last year, the life insurance increase, Liam's morning revelation, the phone calls from Eleanor, and the unknown number. Reynolds took notes and asked clarifying questions. When I finished, she called in another detective, a younger man named Detective Miller, and had me repeat it all. Then they gently asked Liam to describe what he'd heard. My son sat up straight in his chair and spoke clearly, his voice stronger than I expected. Daddy was in his office. I heard him say Mommy's name. Then he said something about insurance money and how much it would be. Then he said the house would burn tonight while he was gone and it would look like an accident because of old wires. Did he say anything else? Miller asked softly. Liam thought for a moment. He said, "Make sure you wait until after dark." And then he said, "I'll be at dinner with clients all night." Perfect alibi. Reynolds and Miller exchanged glances. "Liam, you're a very brave boy," Reynolds said. "You helped your mom a lot today." She sent Miller out of the room and leaned forward. "Mrs. Grayson, we're going to get surveillance on your house immediately. If anyone shows up or attempts anything, we'll have them. We're also going to contact Denver PD to verify your husband's whereabouts and activities. But I need you to understand that this is now an active investigation. You cannot go back to that house, and you cannot contact your husband." "Where are we supposed to go? Do you have somewhere safe? Family or friends out of state?" I thought desperately. My college roommate, Sarah, lived in Philadelphia now. We'd drifted apart, but we still sent Christmas cards. "I might, but I don't have money for a flight or a long-term hotel." Reynolds pulled out a business card and scribbled something on the back. "This is a women's shelter that helps domestic violence victims. They have resources for emergency situations. I know this doesn't look like typical domestic violence, but attempted murder falls under their umbrella. They can help you with temporary housing and financial assistance." The word victim hit me like a physical blow. Was that what I was now? What happens next? I asked. "We watch and wait. If someone shows up at your house with accelerant or tries to start a fire, we arrest them. If nothing happens, we'll need to investigate further. Either way, you and Liam need to stay hidden. If your husband realizes you know what he's planning, you could be in immediate danger." The shelter was in a residential neighborhood, disguised as an ordinary house. Reynolds drove us there herself, checking her mirrors constantly to ensure we weren't followed. Inside, a woman named Maria welcomed us with a practiced calm that suggested she'd seen everything before. She showed us to a small room with 2 twin beds, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto a garden. It was clean and quiet, safe. "You can stay here as long as you need," Maria said. "We have counselors available, legal advocates, and resources to help you get back on your feet. Right now, just rest." But rest was impossible. I lay in the narrow bed that night with Liam curled against me, his breath warm on my shoulder, and stared at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw our house burning. I saw Ethan at a restaurant in Denver, checking his watch and waiting for the call that would tell him he was free. Free of us. Free to claim $2 million and start over. Had he planned to remarry, move away? The questions tormented me. At 11 p.m., my prepaid phone rang. Detective Reynolds' voice was tight with controlled excitement. "Mrs. Grayson, we got him." At approximately 10:15 tonight, a man approached her property with 2 containers of gasoline. He attempted to enter through the back door using a key. Officers arrested him on the spot. We've identified him as David Olson, a former construction worker with a record of arson for hire. I couldn't breathe. Did he say who hired him? He's not talking yet, but we found text messages on his phone that reference a payment and instructions. We're working on getting phone records and financial information. I need you to know that your husband is still in Denver. We've confirmed his location, but we're bringing him in for questioning as soon as he lands tomorrow. Will Liam and I have to testify? Possibly, but we have strong physical evidence now. The text messages, the gasoline, Olson's presence at your property, and Liam's testimony about what he overheard establishes premeditation. This is attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit arson. Your husband is looking at serious prison time. The reality of it crashed over me. My husband had tried to have us killed. The man I'd shared a bed with, raised a child with, built a life with, had calculated our deaths as a financial transaction. Mrs. Grayson, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. Get some rest. I'll call you in the morning with updates. I hung up and looked at Liam, sleeping peacefully for the first time in 24 hours. His small hand clutched the edge of my shirt, holding on even in sleep. The next morning, Reynolds called at 9 a.m. Your husband landed an hour ago. We had officers waiting at the airport. He's in custody now, being questioned. I thought you'd want to know. Did he say anything? He denied everything initially. Said we were crazy, that he loved you and Liam, but when we showed him the evidence, the text from his burner phone to Olson, the bank transfers, he went silent. Asked for a lawyer. What about his mother? Eleanor knew something. We're looking into her involvement. The spare key Olson used came from somewhere. If she provided it or had any knowledge of the plan, she could be charged as an accessory. Over the following weeks, the truth emerged piece by piece like a grotesque puzzle. Ethan's business was failing worse than I'd known. He'd taken out loans using our house as collateral. Loans I'd never signed off on. He'd forged my signature. He was drowning in debt to some very dangerous people, and the life insurance money had been his only way out. Eleanor had known about the financial problems. She'd helped Ethan hide them from me, even co-signing on some of the loans. When he proposed his solution, she'd been horrified but ultimately complicit, more concerned with protecting her son than with the lives of her grandson and daughter-in-law. The trial was set for the following spring. In the meantime, Liam and I stayed at the shelter, then moved into a small apartment across town with help from victim services. I took a leave of absence from teaching to process everything and protect Liam from the media attention. My son started therapy immediately. Dr. Davies specialized in childhood trauma, and slowly Liam began to understand that what happened wasn't his fault. That speaking up had saved us both. The weeks following Ethan's arrest felt surreal. Reporters camped outside the shelter until Maria threatened them with trespassing charges. My phone, even the prepaid one, rang constantly with numbers I didn't recognize. Local news picked up the story, and suddenly we were the family saved by a 5-year-old hero. I hated that narrative. Liam wasn't a hero by choice. He was a traumatized child who'd been forced into an impossible situation by his own father. Detective Reynolds became our unofficial liaison with the outside world. She screened calls, handled media requests, and kept me updated on the investigation's progress. 3 weeks after Ethan's arrest, she arrived at the shelter with a cardboard box. These are some of Liam's things from the house, she explained. We finished processing the scene. The house is technically still yours, but I wouldn't recommend going back there. I opened the box to find Liam's favorite stuffed elephant, some clothes, and his school backpack. Underneath was a framed photo from our last family vacation to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. We looked happy. Ethan had his arm around me. Liam sat on his shoulders, grinning at the camera. It felt like looking at strangers. There's something else, Reynolds said carefully. We found a notebook in your husband's home office. It's disturbing. His attorney tried to suppress it as evidence, but the judge ruled it admissible. I thought you should know what's in it before the trial. She pulled out a photocopy of several pages. Ethan's handwriting filled them, neat and methodical. I recognized it from birthday cards and grocery lists. The first page was titled Timeline and detailed every step of his plan: when to arrange the business trip, when to hire David Olson, when to increase the life insurance, when to establish his alibi. The second page made me physically ill. Potential obstacles was written at the top. Beneath it, he'd listed concerns about the plan. What if Liam woke up? What if a neighbor saw something? What if the fire department responded too quickly? For each concern, he'd written a solution. Liam would be given children's Benadryl at dinner to ensure deep sleep. The fire would start in the basement, away from neighbors' view. The old wiring would delay fire marshal investigations. He thought of everything except the possibility that his 5-year-old son would wake up early and overhear him. There's more, Reynolds said gently. She turned to another page. This one was titled After. It detailed Ethan's plans for the insurance money. Pay off the debts first, obviously, then invest the remainder in a new business venture. He'd even researched moving to Atlanta, Georgia, where his college roommate lived. At the bottom of the page, in smaller handwriting, he'd written, "Give it 6 months, then start dating again. Someone without kids would be easier." I dropped the papers like they'd burn me. "I'm sorry," Reynolds said. "I debated showing you this, but the prosecution will reference it during trial. Better you see it now, in private." He'd already moved on, I whispered. Before we were even dead, he'd planned his next life. Reynolds didn't respond. There was nothing to say. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maria had given me sleeping pills after the first few sleepless nights, but I'd stopped taking them. I needed to be alert, present for Liam. But staring at the ceiling, I kept seeing those pages, the cold calculation of it, the complete absence of love or regret in his planning. Had he ever loved me, or had I always been just another asset, valuable only for what I could provide? I got up quietly and checked on Liam. He slept curled around his elephant, peaceful. Dr. Davies said children were remarkably resilient, but I saw the changes in my son. He flinched at loud noises now. He asked permission before doing anything, even getting a snack. He watched me constantly, as if afraid I'd disappear. The damage Ethan had inflicted went far beyond the fire that never happened. 2 months after moving into our apartment, I finally returned to the house with Reynolds and her escort. The police had released it back to me, and I needed to retrieve more of our belongings before putting it on the market. Pulling into the driveway felt like visiting a grave. The house looked exactly the same from the outside: white siding, black shutters, the flower beds I planted last spring. But knowing what nearly happened here transformed it into something sinister. Reynolds waited by the front door as I unlocked it with shaking hands. Inside, everything was untouched. Coffee mug still sat in the sink from that last morning. Liam's backpack hung on its hook by the door. The calendar on the refrigerator showed September with Ethan's Denver trip marked in blue pen. I walked through the rooms mechanically, boxing up clothes and personal items. In Liam's room, I packed his toys and books, his bedding and posters. In my bedroom, I grabbed clothes and jewelry, avoiding Ethan's side of the closet entirely. The hardest part was the photos. Years of memories lined the hallway and living room walls: wedding pictures, Liam's baby photos, holidays and birthdays, and ordinary moments that had once meant everything. I took down every frame, packed them in a box, and wrote storage on the side. Someday, Liam might want to see himself as a baby, might want to remember the father who'd existed before the monster emerged. But not now. Not while the wounds were still open. In Ethan's office, I found more evidence of his double life. Credit card statements I'd never seen, showing charges at restaurants I'd never visited, hotel receipts from trips he'd claimed were work-related. An email inbox on his desktop filled with messages from someone named Bethany discussing their future together once he sorted out his situation. So, there had been another woman. The investigation hadn't uncovered her yet, but here was proof that Ethan's plans for after extended beyond just financial freedom. I forwarded the emails to Reynolds and kept packing. By the time I finished, the house looked hollow, stripped of our presence. It was just walls and floors and the ghost of lives that might have been. Reynolds helped me load the last boxes into a rental truck. "You doing okay?" "I don't know what okay feels like anymore," I admitted. "Some days I'm angry. Some days I'm just numb. Mostly I'm exhausted from trying to be strong for Liam." "You don't always have to be strong. That's what therapy is for." I'd started seeing Dr. Sanchez, a trauma specialist who worked with Dr. Davies' practice. Twice a week, I sat in her office and tried to process the grief of losing my marriage, the terror of nearly losing my life, and the overwhelming responsibility of raising a traumatized child alone. She diagnosed me with PTSD. The hypervigilance, the nightmares, the panic attacks that struck without warning. It had a name, a treatment plan, medications that might help, but knowing what it was didn't make it easier to live with. The apartment complex where we lived had security cameras and a guard at the front gate. I'd specifically chosen it for those features, needing the illusion of safety, even though Ethan was locked up awaiting trial. Eleanor had made bail, and though she was under house arrest with an ankle monitor, I didn't trust that she'd stay away. My fears proved justified 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I was making dinner when the apartment's intercom buzzed. The guard's voice crackled through. "Ma'am, there's a Patricia Grayson here requesting entry. She's not on your approved visitor list." My hands froze on the cutting board. "Tell her no. Tell her if she comes back, I'll file for a restraining order." "Will do, ma'am." But she didn't leave. 10 minutes later, my phone rang from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Please." Eleanor's voice was thick with tears. "I just want to see my grandson. I know what I did was wrong, but Liam is still my family." "You helped your son try to end our lives," I said coldly. "You don't get to play grandmother now." I didn't know what Ethan was planning. Not the details. I thought he was just going to stage a burglary or something minor for the insurance money. I never imagined you gave him the spare key. You called me that day trying to make sure we'd be home. You knew enough. She sobbed openly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was trying to help my son, and I made a terrible mistake. But Liam is innocent in this. He shouldn't lose his whole family because of what we did. He lost his family the moment his father decided we were worth less than $2 million. You don't get to rewrite that narrative." I hung up and blocked the number. Liam came out of his room where he'd been playing with Legos. Was that Grandma Eleanor? I'd never lied to him about anything related to what happened. Dr. Davies said honesty, age-appropriate but complete, was essential for his healing. "Yes, sweetheart." "Does she want to see me?" "She does, but I told her no." Liam thought about this for a long moment. "Because she helped Daddy?" "Yes." "Okay." He went back to his Legos, apparently satisfied. But that night, he crawled into my bed after a nightmare. "Mom, do you think Daddy ever really loved me?" The question shattered me. I pulled him close, feeling his small body shake with suppressed tears. "I think your daddy loved you in the only way he knew how. But he was sick in his head, baby. He made choices that hurt people, hurt us. That's not about you or anything you did. That's about him being broken inside. Dr. Davies says some people's brains don't work right. That they can't feel things the same way. That's true. Is my brain broken like Daddy's?" I tilted his chin up so he had to look at me. "No, your brain is perfect. You knew something was wrong, and you told me. You saved us both because your brain works exactly right. You're nothing like your father. He nodded against my shoulder. I miss having a dad though, even if mine was bad. I know, sweetheart. I know. We lay there in the darkness, holding each other, mourning the family we'd lost and the life that could never be recovered. The holidays approached with grim inevitability. I'd always loved Christmas, but the thought of celebrating anything felt obscene. Still, Liam deserved some normalcy, some reminder that life continued despite the horror we'd survived. Harper flew out again for Thanksgiving, bringing her girlfriend, Ashley, with her. They filled our small apartment with laughter and terrible jokes and helped me cook a turkey that turned out surprisingly edible. Liam warmed to them quickly, especially when Ashley taught him card tricks. Watching him smile, really smile, for the first time in months, made me cry into the mashed potatoes. He's going to be okay, Harper said quietly while we did dishes. You both are. How do you know? Because you're here. You're fighting. You're getting him help and getting yourself help. That's all any of us can do after trauma. Keep showing up. Keep trying. For Christmas, I bought Liam the remote control car he'd been asking for since October. We decorated a small tree in our living room, hung stockings, and baked cookies. I invited Maria and some of the other women from the shelter for Christmas dinner, creating our own makeshift family of survivors. On Christmas morning, Liam opened his presents with appropriate enthusiasm, but I caught him staring out the window afterward. What are you thinking about, honey? Last Christmas, Daddy built me a fort out of all the boxes. We had a snowball fight in the yard. His voice was wistful. I like that. Those were good memories, I agreed. You're allowed to miss the good parts while still understanding that what happened was wrong. Can people be good and bad at the same time? Yes, people are complicated. Your father did some good things and loved you in his way, but he also made terrible choices that hurt us. Both things can be true. Liam processed this with a seriousness that had become his default expression. I think I want to see him at the trial. I'd been dreading this conversation. Dr. Davies had warned me it might come. My sister, Chloe, called once, crying and apologizing for always siding with Ethan. I told her I needed time before I could even consider forgiving her. She accepted that. Harper flew out from Arizona and stayed for a week, helping me set up the apartment and just being present. She didn't offer meaningless platitudes or try to make sense of the senseless. She just sat with me in the grief and rage. The preliminary hearings revealed even more disturbing details. Ethan had researched electrical fires extensively, looking for the most believable accelerants and ignition points. He planned it for months, waiting for a business trip that would give him an ironclad alibi. He calculated the insurance payout down to the dollar, even researched which funeral homes offer discounts for double services. He planned our deaths with the same meticulous attention he'd once used to plan our wedding. I sat in the courtroom during his arraignment and looked at the man I'd married. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders were slumped, his expensive suit rumpled. He looked diminished, pathetic. I felt nothing. The love I'd had for him was so completely destroyed that not even hatred remained. Just a vast, cold emptiness where my marriage used to be. When they led him away in handcuffs, I stood up and walked out without looking back. The trial happened in April. Spring had come to Chicago, bringing green leaves and warm sunshine that felt obscene given what we were living through. Liam didn't have to testify in person. The judge allowed his recorded statement to be played instead. Hearing my son's voice fill the courtroom, explaining calmly what he'd overheard, broke me in ways I hadn't expected. Several jurors wiped their eyes. Ethan's defense attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone fabricating evidence to punish an unfaithful husband, but the physical evidence was overwhelming: the text messages, the bank transfers. David Olson's testimony in exchange for a reduced sentence. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Ethan to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for 15. Eleanor received 5 years as an accessory after the fact for providing the spare key and helping to hide the financial fraud. In his final statement before sentencing, Ethan asked to speak. The judge allowed it. He stood up slowly and turned to look at me for the first time since the trial began. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice cracked. I was desperate and stupid, and I convinced myself it was the only way. I never wanted to hurt Liam. I thought he'd be asleep. You thought what? I interrupted, standing up despite my attorney's hand on my arm. That trying to murder me and possibly our son in a fire was somehow merciful, that the $2 million was worth our lives? The courtroom went silent. "You're not sorry for planning it," I continued. "You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry that a 5-year-old was brave enough to save us both. You don't get to ask for forgiveness. You don't get to be the victim here." I sat back down, shaking. The judge cleared her throat. "I have nothing to add to that," she said. "Mr. Grayson, you'll have 25 years to contemplate what you've lost." Bailiffs removed the defendant. As they led him away, Ethan looked back one more time. Not at me, but at the empty space where Liam should have been sitting. His face crumpled, and I knew in that moment he finally understood what he destroyed. Not just our lives, but any relationship with his son. Liam would grow up knowing his father had tried to end his life for money. That knowledge would shape him forever. Another casualty of Ethan's desperation. After the sentencing, Reynolds met me outside the courthouse. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel relief, but mostly I just feel tired." "That's normal. Justice doesn't erase trauma, but it's a start." She handed me a folder. "These are resources for victims of attempted murder. Support groups, therapists who specialize in this kind of trauma, legal advocates who can help you navigate the civil suit against his estate. Civil suit for the emotional damages and the fraud. You're entitled to compensation. Use it to build a new life for you and Liam." I took the folder numbly. Over the next year, Liam and I slowly rebuilt. We moved to a different suburb, far from the house we'd never returned to. I went back to teaching, finding solace in the routine of lesson plans and parent conferences. Liam continued therapy and started showing interest in martial arts. Dr. Davies said it was his way of reclaiming a sense of control and safety. The civil suit was settled out of court. Ethan's assets, once untangled from his debts and fraud, amounted to $400,000. It went into a trust for Liam's future and a fund to cover our ongoing therapy costs. I started dating again eventually, though trust came hard. The first time a man mentioned life insurance on a third date, I nearly walked out before realizing he was just making conversation about his job as a financial planner. Liam asked about his father sometimes. I answered honestly, but age-appropriately, never lying, but never burdening him with details he wasn't ready for. Dr. Davies said he'd need to process it again at different developmental stages, and we were prepared for that journey. 2 years after the trial, I stood in Liam's second-grade classroom for parent-teacher night. His self-portrait was pinned to the wall, a smiling stick figure holding hands with a smaller stick figure. "Me and Mom" was written underneath in careful letters. His teacher, Ms. Jenkins, pulled me aside. "I want you to know that Liam is one of the most resilient children I've ever taught. Whatever you're doing, it's working." I looked at my son across the room, laughing with a classmate over a science project. He'd survived something that would have broken many adults. He'd been brave when I was paralyzed with fear. He'd saved both our lives. "He's pretty amazing," I agreed. That night, after tucking Liam into bed, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine and looked around our small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Safe, chosen, built on truth instead of lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. How's my favorite survivor? I smiled. Surviving, thriving, even, most days. That's all any of us can do after trauma. Keep showing up. Keep trying. Love you. Love you, too. I turned off the lights and checked the locks one final time. A habit I'd never shake. But instead of fear, I felt something close to peace. We'd survived. Against all odds, against a man who'd planned our deaths with cold precision. We'd survived. Liam's small voice in the parking garage had changed everything. Sometimes I thought about what would have happened if he'd stayed silent that morning. If he'd been too afraid to tell me what he'd heard, we'd have gone home, gone to bed, and at some point after dark, flames would have consumed everything. But he'd been brave. 5 years old and terrified, but brave enough to speak up. That's the story I tell him when he's older, when he can fully understand what had happened. Not just about his father's betrayal, but about his own courage. About how one small voice speaking truth in the face of unimaginable danger could change the course of 2 lives, could save them both. In a situation like that, facing the unthinkable, what would have been your very first move?